Great. I'm going to call to order the zoning bylaw working group meeting of February 3rd, 2022 at 11:04 a.m. Quick roll call. Present Katie Dugan.
Woody Chidick, aye.
Paul Caleri, aye.
Peter, you're muted.
Peter Pescatori, present.
Great. All right, next order of business. Sorry, be off my game here. Next order of business is approval of the minutes from January 25th, 2021. I circulated those this morning. I did notice a typo at the top. I had January 5th instead of January 25th, but I made that correction. But other than that, any other comments?
Nope.
Okay, great. I'm gonna ask for, I make a motion to approve the minutes from January 25th, 2021. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, competing seconds. All in favor, aye. Katie Dugan.
Woody
Aye,
Chidick,
Peter
aye.
Pescatori.
Aye, Paul Caleri.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I will get those off to the town clerk. Next order of business, we have just kind of two quick updates that we wanted to get through. First on the RFQ, and then second, I just wanted Tom to update everybody about residential rules and regulations. And then the meat of the conversation is actually going to be around what we talked about the last time, beginning to think about the reorganization outline and definitions. And I think this will be one of a couple conversations before we kind of coalesce around, but I think, as Tom was suggesting, we should start doing this work, beginning to bring some of our thoughts together into a written document. And I think that was part of what Tom was proposing, was to try and move us forward in terms of documenting concrete proposals and language. So with that, Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us a quick update on RFQ. You had graciously agreed to make phone calls last week to the 16 or so firms that we had sent out directly the bid, and just get a sense of kind of where the firms are at in terms of their thinking.
Thanks for doing that, Paul. Oh, Paul, you're on mute.
Thanks. It's usually once a day it happens, you know? No problem. Happy to do it. Glad I could find a place in this group where I specialize in making phone calls and talking to people. However, with that being said, I was kind of sad to find out that not a lot of people, sorry, I'm working on multiple devices here. Not a lot of people had a chance to look at it, or even I think half of the people that I did speak to said that they didn't even receive it. And after I had resent it, because I reached out to Michelle Leary, and she sent me the version that she had sent out. And so half of the list just got voicemails from me. Half of the list, the phone numbers didn't work any longer. Offices had moved. Email addresses were no longer valid.
Oh, no.
So yeah, there was some issues with getting the information into the right hands. So I think that's why we didn't have a very big response. I think Katie has up there screen sharing now the list of all the people that it went out to. And
Paul, did anyone say thank you, no thank you, we're passing? Or
I did get that from two different parties. Let's see. I can put these notes in order of which would make sense to everybody. You wouldn't be able to make sense of my notes here, but I did take notes while I was talking to people, but I will consolidate the things that I discovered in terms of whose offices aren't there. I literally reached out to everybody on the list except for Judy, because Judy had already responded and showed up for the question and answer type of space that we had.
Yep.
She obviously was the only one. But the others, there were two groups. This is the silver lining, I guess. There were two groups that were excited to have me reach out and ask them if they would take a closer look at the proposal. And they said that they would probably need some more time. And Michelle, Larry, and I also spoke about maybe extending this February 10th deadline to give people an opportunity to actually see it. And I'm still waiting on a few more calls back. I left a few messages. Like I said, the numbers that were working, I left messages. Only a couple called me back. I was able to connect directly with a couple. So what I can see is we have two different, agencies, companies, organizations that would like to potentially have some of their questions answered, which would be maybe another question. And I kind of directed them towards Michelle
Yep.
to answer more detailed questions that they might have.
I
So
guess I'm wondering if Michelle got those same kickbacks when she distributed via email. Be interested.
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm
I can-
also curious where the list came from. I don't know if it was like a Google search or if there's like a list out there. These are the, I'm
No,
sure somebody
I
did
went
a
through-
lot of work.
I
Yeah,
went
yeah,
through
yeah.
each website specifically to grab each contact information.
Yeah. And, with, I guess, COVID, a lot of people working
Yeah.
from home, I think a lot of, if Cassie, if you look through the list, maybe you and I'm sorry, I wasn't able to meet with you and Katie last week. I was dealing with the frozen pipes, but regardless, maybe Cassie, you and I could chat a little bit because, some of the like info at horsley.witten.com and some of the other emails like that. I don't think that people are staffed like they used to be to respond to those types. And so what I found was making some phone calls. A few of the people gave me direct email addresses to send them to.
Okay,
And just
like
if
who's
you
the principal that's like in charge of business development instead of the
exactly.
chair? Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
No,
So
and
one was
I think that's a
Utile.
great point. I did look for that specifically for direct contact, and some of these websites are very generic that says, here's the info content, and it's like it's very simple contact page.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, I agree with you getting a direct contact, and I did try to do that. It's
So
unfortunate.
I'd say it was, part of it was disappointing to find out that not a lot of people had a real opportunity to look at it or find it. Even so, Katie, if you are taking some notes there,
Yeah.
the second page, Utile, I think that's how you say it.
Oh,
The
good.
office in Boston
Utile?
on Kingston Street. Yeah.
Big deal.
Util Design, really, really nice people over there. Spoke back and forth with them a couple of times and sent now a clean version that I got from Michelle to them. And they said that they would love to know if we decide as a group today, which I think we should, extend that February 10th deadline out maybe a week or two to give people an opportunity to dig in and ask some questions and
Yep.
put together an appropriate. So that was one outfit that was very
awesome.
interested.
Okay.
And then on the next page, Katie, if you're following along, possibly even the page after that. Yeah. On what looks like the second to last page, Bob Ritchie and Robert Mitchell.
Yep.
Do you see them there? They
I
take
do,
up
yep.
a big section there. So I spoke to Bob a couple of times. He also was one that told me, even after receiving it from me this time, he looked through his junk mail and everything and didn't find anything from the Cohasset exchange, email link, cohassetma.org. So he's not sure what happened to the proposal, but anyway, he was happy to get it. They would like to look at it, ask some
Yep.
questions, potentially submit a bid. So, and again, I'll break this all down for you, Katie, in more detail with just a simple Word document so you can see what I have here.
Okay.
But the other, like just underneath Bob's information there is Anderson Kruger, I think, Krager.
Yeah,
So they said, that they're really like a legal firm,
Yeah.
and their fees would probably be too high and it wouldn't make really practical sense, but they could, as these, this sheet that you put together, they'd be like in combo with somebody else, or like help out a more of a planning agency. They'd do maybe just the legal work on it. So they said if they could be of help in terms of the legal work, in just making sure that after we reconstruct and redraft and reorganize, they could then take a look at it, because they just said it wouldn't make sense for a firm like them to take on the whole rewrite just because it would cost too much.
yeah. And we already have town council teed up to do a bunch of the legal work. Yep. Okay.
Right. So I got through the whole list.
Okay.
Back and forth with some voicemails and some emails.
Which groups Paul said thanks, but no thanks,
Let's see.
regardless of if they were soon initially or.
Message. No. So maybe I've got just the two no's from Anderson,
Yep.
and on the third page, as I'm looking at it here, Camaris.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
CAMI.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Okay.
They also said short-staffed, a little bit overwhelmed with their workload, but I know that there was one other. So I think I got 3 kind of not interested, can't take it on.
What did
Couldn't-
VHB say?
What is it?
VHB, the group above Camiros?
VHB, Sean Manning. I left
Yeah.
Sean a message. I haven't heard back from him.
Okay. Katie, I think the final version that I sent out last week is dated 1/27.
Okay. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to make sure that that's the one I shared.
I think
I'm
I
sure
have
you
the
did. I
latest
grabbed this
version
from
here.
my files that I just had readily available.
So I guess the good news is, again, 2 people really, and potentially more, with messages that hadn't got returned yet. Some of the phone numbers that I called were no longer working, but I think as a group, if we decided to extend it out for a couple of more weeks, I know that time is of the essence, and there was obvious reasons we picked February 10th, but to give a few more people an opportunity to compete and submit a bid, I think maybe it would serve the committee and the town if we postponed it just for a couple of weeks, and I can continue to make some more follow-ups on this list that I have here.
Yeah, I would, it's sort of helpful to understand sort of what the market is out there. And I do think you're right that a lot of people, especially consulting firms over the last 18 months, like their physical office spaces are probably either their leases are up and they're deciding to work from home, or reality is that people have not been in the office. So I'm not surprised that some of this is dinged. I will follow up with Michelle also, because she had said, and she does track officially as part of her procurement job, that there was one firm that responded back in her initial outreach that said no, and that may be the same one that you also got a no from, Paul, that said we're capacity constrained. And she didn't give me the name at the time. And so I'll track that down just so that we kind of complete the list. But if you can type up your notes and share them with the group, plus Michelle Leary, I think that would be really helpful from a tracking perspective.
Yeah.
I do think that, if we're serious about pursuing the broader community engagement and the broader work beyond just the reorganization, that we do need the help of a consultant. And so I would like to propose, like Paul suggested, that we extend this. I guess my question is, bids were due in a week. My sense, just from listening to you, Paul, is that, perhaps we extend this out a full 3 weeks, maybe to the 24th of February. So giving next week to get the word out that we've extended the deadline, offer up firms to do requests for information again, and then have people submit the bids end of February instead of on February 10th. Lauren, do you have a reaction? I think I'd rather extend it once in a meaningful way and see if we can get some additional bids than just do a short extension, because we feel like we're pressed for time.
I would concur with that. And then what I would suggest, I will work with Michelle and you all also to make sure that the scheduling, everything that needs to get pushed beyond that works. Because I know March gets a little dicey for some schedules, but I'm happy to help coordinate that.
Yeah. And so,
Well, I was just gonna ask, did you get kickbacks from RKG and Principal Group? They're on the first page. They seem like pretty robust teams. Just would be surprised if they were understaffed.
are you asking Paul?
Paul, yep, sorry.
There I go. I'm muted again. So the Boston number is not working. That phone number there, that 8912 Boston number. So I didn't get direct contact with them. I think I mailed again that mail at rkgassociates.com. And I can,
And you didn't get
look.
a kickback.
No, I didn't get a kickback. No, but I also didn't get a response.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone is servicing mail at, I think I even went as far to look and called the DC number, because I looked up and I think I left a voicemail maybe in the DC office.
Oh, wow.
So
You're a pretty
that's
big
what my
group.
notes. I just don't know, like I tried it multiple times, the 617-847-8912, and it never connected me to anything. So when I went online and looked up RKG Associates, I found that they did have a DC office, and I called the DC office and left a message there. And I think, like I said, I mailed that again just through my own email, and I didn't get any response.
I wonder, as a next step too. So what I'm happy to do, and we'll have the team's feedback, is I'm happy to create like another column on the tracking sheet that's just called communication/feedback. And once I get Paul's notes, I can just kind of run through this. As a last resort too, it's always, I feel like, meaningful to directly message people on LinkedIn. And that usually gets checked. So that's an option too, if people don't have their cell phones posted on their website. I'm just trying to think of other ways for outreach.
I think that's it. Unfortunately, I don't think physically showing up at people's office is going to be very helpful either, because no one will be home.
No one's going to answer the door.
No one's going to answer the door. Okay. All right. Lauren, maybe what we can do is get a quick meeting with Michelle to kind of run through this timetable and mark it up jointly in terms of how we want to extend it out to February 24th as bids due, and see if Michelle has any other suggestions as to how we might mark it up. And that's quick and easy. So I'm happy. She doesn't work Fridays, right?
I'm not sure. She does have most Fridays she's conflicted out lately, but I spoke with her briefly this morning and let her know that I'd check in with her after this meeting.
Okay.
So I'll circle back with you after this, and we can get something to schedule as soon as she has availability to retweak this.
Okay. That's right. Today is Thursday. God, I'm off. Okay. All right. Well, let me how about this? How about I do a markup? And you reach out to her about getting a meeting set up, and I'll make myself available. Cassie and I will try and make ourselves available whenever Michelle can give us time. And then Cassie, if you don't mind working with Paul around getting all the notes consolidated so that we've got sort of a tracking spreadsheet,
Yep.
that would be great.
But for what it's worth, UTL is a really strong team. So that's exciting, at least to hear from them. And Stantec's similar. There's a way to definitely get a hold of Stantec. So thank you again, Paul, for doing that.
No problem. Did you say Stantec?
Yeah, is Stantec on the list? Might have taken them off because they're more like architecture focused, but they're like a UTL where they would partner with someone if needed.
Yeah, I don't see Stantec on the list.
Okay.
All right. Well, if we're gonna
Yeah,
make-
Cassie and I will circle back together. I don't know if we have to take a vote as the group or whatever, but to make it official, but I concur with everyone and think that extending it an appropriate amount of time rather than trying to just kick it out a week or two, go the full 3 weeks and maybe put people on notice that that's what we decided to do. And given the current condition of everyone's workplace, we figured a few more weeks would be beneficial for everybody.
Okay. Well, let me run through the timeline today and see when I kick it out 3 versus 4 weeks, what I bumped into in terms of conflicts. But I think that is the right, I don't know if we need to take a vote per se, but I'm happy to do that. Just kind of pull the group. Woody, Tom, Peter, your thoughts on extending the deadline?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate. Yeah.
I think when you have
But,
consensus.
you know,
you
with
vote.
Paul's reporting of how many misses, you know, how many bad addresses and no responses, any way to hygiene the list for, make, get better contact?
I don't think so unless Cassie's been through all their public websites. It's a matter of the firms not updating their public website. So it's not really anything we can do on that front, but I think Cassie's suggestion around the only thought that I had is, if you can identify the 1 or 2 principals that are partners, sort of the top partners at the firm, perhaps you email them directly instead of using the info@ or the kind of generic business development email, and rather target some top partners. That's the only other thought I had, in addition to Cassie's suggestion about LinkedIn messaging. Those are sort of the only.
It's just how do you get that email? It might be on the websites, but
Yeah, I could just go to the team sections and see if like there's principals profiles and then see if there's a signature block or something.
Yeah.
Paul, what did Ted Brovitz say? He's pretty local. I don't know if he's semi-retired with COVID hitting, but he's right down the street from us.
I didn't get a call back from Ted. I called him, left him a message. What's today? Like Katie, I don't even know what day it is. Thursday?
It's Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was Monday afternoon. I called and left a message. I could follow up or see if, he has a Gmail address on there, so
Yeah.
I could send him a note personally. I think, starting with him being on the top of the list, I think I left him a message, and then others I started digging in more because I was like, all right, well, I can't just leave everybody messages, But
Oh, I know. No, and just
I-
I'm not saying that Ted is our guy. I did hear feedback
Sure.
that Situate master plan that he worked on was like, it looks like a copy and paste from what he worked on Brookline in certain sections. So, but I just was surprised, if we didn't hear from him, because he's just a one-off guy that does his own thing and he's local. So it's just
Right.
interesting.
you would think it'd be some low hanging fruit for him
Yeah,
being
exactly.
next door to us.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, I will, so we've got Cassie and Paul, they're gonna work the list. And then Lauren will help us connect with Michelle and come up with a new timeline. Once that's finalized, I'll publish it to the full group so that everybody knows whether we chose to have the bids come in on the 24th or on the 3rd, depending on what Michelle recommends in terms of pushing it 3 versus 4 weeks. In the grand scheme of things, I'd rather have, 2, 3, 4 bids come in with a little extra time than just have one bid. It just makes no sense in terms of the strategy here. A month delay versus an indefinite delay is kind of the way I'm looking at it. So I think that was really good work on Paul's part. And it also, I mean, Cassie and I will try and have the process conversation with Michelle around, if she either got bounce backs.
Yep.
If she got bounce backs, what did she do? She just documented a bounce back. That's not very helpful to us.
Right.
Versus
That's what I'd be
digging-
surprised to know is kind of cross-referencing if Paul and Michelle got the same bounce backs.
Yeah, I mean, we'll find out more on that front, but okay. All right, so that's the update on the RFQ. The next update is around the residential zoning rules and regulations, and that, Tom, I just wanted you to give a brief update around the 2 discussions that have happened at the planning board on that. The first happened at the beginning of January. The second one happened, or actually the first one happened in December. The second one happened in January, and now it's being continued until March at this point.
Well, Tom, you're muted. Tom.
First time for Tom.
Oh, yeah. No,
No.
that's a daily occurrence.
It would be nice to have that capability everywhere I am, to just mute me at your desire. Anyway, and I'm doing this off my phone today, but so at the last meeting, it was like a repeat of town meeting. We were assaulted by the developer community. We had participation from Dr. O'Prey, from what's his name now? I can't, the guy from Norwell,
Bjorklund.
Steve Bjorklund. And then the attorney for the property owner on Black Horse Lane.
Wadsky, right?
Watsky, yeah, a guy named Matt Watsky. He's from Dedham. I've known him for quite a while, but the long and the short, again, so it was a repeat of why do we need this? This is bad. This is horrible. Amongst members of the board, I mean, at various times, every member said something nice about supporting this, but it's clear that for some of my fellow members, there has to be a problem to solve rather than being proactive in changing something. My own personal opinion is some of them are just echoing the objections of the developer community. We didn't have any other community input at all. But the most serious issue that was brought up by Attorney Watsky was whether we had the authority to issue regulations. We have authority to amend the common driveway regs, I believe, already. We've passed them and they've been amended in the past. But the question was whether we had the authority for the rest of it, for the regulation of the non-subdivision streets, for the enforcement provisions, for the assumptions and presumptions about adequacy and the process of compelling an upgrade. So Attorney Watsky brought that up. This got vetted. I didn't catch it. Carolyn didn't catch it. We have to look at that. I believe that although I made the argument again that these changes could be made independent of the definition changes we made and could be usable to the board now. I believe in the definition changes we had included additional specific authority to pass regulations. So with that article not passing, perhaps we did not provide ourselves the authority we need. So we have to check on that. Is Carolyn on with us this morning?
She is not.
Okay. All right. Well, I have to follow up with her specifically about that, because that's really the only valid point that I heard that was brought. The rest of it was just, oh, I wouldn't want to see this because I'm not stated out loud that it might adversely impact me personally. So we've continued all of it till March 30th in order to sort all of this out. But if we do not have the authority within the bylaw to pass a regulation on a specific subject, we can't go forward with the regulation until we get that authority. My own thought is on the common driveways, we could at least change the existing regulation, both as to the number of houses served and the maximum length of a common driveway. Currently, that's 8 houses and 750 square feet, and the proposal was to bring it down to 3 houses and I believe 350 feet. So, I mean, my own thought right now is to at least go forward with that change. If all my fellow members of the board keep to what they said, I would think they would support that. In the meantime, we do have a pending common driveway application that would put 4 houses on a common driveway in a residence area district. So, the world around us moves on, as we deal with this issue. But, as far as other things that we're going to face with the bylaw, I mean, the people that show up at these meetings, the developer community, the outside developers, lawyers for in-town developers or property owners, we're going to continue to confront opposition. I mean, Cohasset enjoys the reputation of being an easy place to permit for a reason, and we're going to face this. And we need, despite them being the minority, they are the ones who will show up at meetings. They are the ones who will speak at town meeting, and we need to have an effective communication against them. The 2 pieces we were working on at the last meeting are going to help, to get our word out there and to get, let us start with a narrative. But, we're just going to get beat up every time we're here, unless we want to play dirty too. But so we'll see what's going to happen. But a lot of this depends first on me having a discussion with Carolyn about, the roots of our authority, and do we have the authority to go as far with this regulation as we wish.
Okay. I guess on the roots of the authority, I mean, just to kind of frame it, as I know you will, I mean, the common driveway authority is already established because there's pre-existing rules and regulations. Similarly, there's pre-existing rules and regulations around residential access when it comes to subdivision under the subdivision bylaws. The extension was to non-subdivision ways. And the strange thing to me is that I sort of go back to the common driveways, like there must have been something that allowed them to issue those rules and regulations in 2011, or excuse me, it was even prior to that. I'm not sure exactly what the date is. I think they were revised in 2011.
Sure.
There's no statement in the definition currently in our bylaws. It says, please see rules and regulations. So
here's Watsky's point, and this is true at the federal level, the state level, and the local level, is that anytime you do a regulation, it has to have some basis of authority in a law, in a statute or a bylaw.
Yeah.
I've always operated under the assumption that we had a broad generalized authority to regulate under the bylaw. And perhaps we do, and it's buried somewhere else. But he's pointed to, I think he pointed to a section in Article 7, which is the one about parking, which would be an unusual place to find this, in my estimation. But we're going to have to go through it. And, yes, we have specific authority to regulate subdivisions and common driveways. Whether that implies we have a broader authority to regulate the roads in between, and then also to create a permitting mechanism and an enforcement mechanism and an upgrade mechanism, that remains to be seen, but we do need to, Carol and I need to talk about this, and whether we have some generalized authority. It could be, for example, in the general bylaw that that describes the planning board. It could be in state statutes, for all I know, that we have that planning boards have the authority to do rules and regulations. I didn't catch it, Carolyn didn't catch it, and it took us aback, but we have to be, that's the one thing we do have to double check and be very clear about.
Okay. Paul Clear, I see that you have your hand up.
Thank you, Katie. Tom, just for point of clarification, you were saying 750 square feet. Did you mean lineal feet or square feet?
My bad, yeah.
Linear.
Linear.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
And to the life of me, I don't know I don't think that the length of the one that's being proposed is anywhere close to that. I think it's under 150, but it is for 4 lots.
Yeah.
And our data backs up. We got into a little discussion the other night about the data, and that 8 is a true outlier, and that part of our objective with this and other provisions is to not make Cohasset an outlier anymore. And we have the data to back that up. That 3 is the right number for a common driveway. I saw an email, I don't know if it was you, Katie, said, do we think about 4? I don't know, but that's for debate, I guess, with the board. But like I said, I'd like to go forward with at least that change what we can, and then worry about the rest once we've straightened out the authority issue.
Yeah. And again, I keep on going back to, this is part of what we talked about when we did our public hearing dog and pony show, was sort of the chapter 40A, which is the zoning act, has these objectives in here in terms of giving the state giving powers to the towns to lessen congestion in the street, handle health and safety, handle adequate provision of transportation, water, water supply, drainage, sewer. Like it goes back to some of these fundamental zoning objectives as to whether that can be a part of the authority or not. I guess that's my question when you do talk to Carolyn, as to whether you can point back to even something as broad as the zoning act in 40A in terms of what it is enabling in the statutes.
Yeah, I've always understood that there was an implied authority, at least an implied authority, if not an express authority, for us to do this, to pass regulations, and for any land use permitting board. But the point's been raised. It'll be challenged. It'll be challenged if we try to do this. Because there was also a sentiment amongst the board of pushing this through with a 3-2 vote or a 4-1 vote, whatever we were going to get the other night, and. I didn't think that was appropriate either, but, because it was clear that it would have been subject to a challenge right away. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think, to me, it seems like the fallback position is pretty clearly to focus on common driveways. If there is the authority to move forward with issuing these rules and regulations, that's obviously something that you and the board need to contemplate. But at a minimum, it feels to me like the common driveways, as their pre-existing rules and regulations, could be subject to change. And we have the data that backs that up. And there's also, I guess the only other thing one of the questions that I heard Clark and others raise is like, what are the examples of where access has been an issue? And I think that if it would be helpful, I'm happy to list out from what I've seen over the last 12 months where access has come up as a topic of community conversation. And it's come up on Black Horse, it's come up on Cedar Lane, it will come up on Lambert's with the common drive. There's a whole bunch of things that we can point to. And I don't think it's 20, but I think it's probably somewhere between 7 to 10 that you could say access and safety of access is a consideration with these additional developments. And so if that's helpful, I'm happy to pull that list together.
It goes to their sentiment of Clark and some others that, well, the only reason we should do anything, whether it's the bylaw or the regulations, is to address an existing problem. And, and I don't agree with that. I think, my answer to that has been, be proactive, anticipate problems, and employ best practices. I mean, those are just as legitimate reasons to change the bylaw or regulations. But to the extent they're going to bring up what's the problem, then yes, we should do that research and we should be ready for that. But we also have to be prepared with the argument that that's not the only reason to do this.
Yeah, but also I think that really the point we have to get across is that what we're seeing is the tip of the iceberg. This isn't finite. And there are 3 or 4 examples that Katie can come up with, period. These are 3 or 4 examples out of some unknown future circumstance.
Well, and I tried to make the point, I think, that we're facing land that's not developed for a reason. Maybe in large part of that was because of the unavailability of sewers. But, we're clearly seeing, quote unquote, back lots off the roads being developed. And we have to make some decisions about how that is going to be developed. I think on that regard, by the way, Clark brought up at the 11th hour this low impact development stuff. And then separately, I was given an email about, as a follow-up to the climate resiliency stuff, about also this concept of low impact development that's out there amongst the planning community. And I quickly glanced at his stuff, and obviously low impact development, one of the things is you just don't put as much pavement on the ground, which a traditional subdivision would do. And I looked at it quickly and I said to Clark that night, I don't think any of that low impact development stuff was inconsistent with the changes we were trying to make in this regulation. But there is going to be the argument being made that if you are going to take us away from common driveways and to, let's just say, larger, better developed roads, you're then at the same time going against modern concepts of low impact development. So they're going to try to cloud the issue with that. I don't think they're inconsistent, but we do need to look into this low impact stuff as well, because it may be the kind of things we should be incorporating into a modern bylaw. But
Yeah.
I got frustrated because they just again, a lot of the points being made about were tied into the town meeting, the warrant articles. The town rejected it. No, the town didn't reject it. There was a lot of obfuscation, a lot of misrepresentation, and we just have to be prepared to respond to this stuff better, and I didn't do a good job responding to it the other night. So
I think it just sort of underscores that need to proactively communicate and lay the base work, the groundwork of like, why are we doing this, a little bit along what Cassie was trying to develop in terms of like, what is the mantra that we're going to repeat that we're going to begin to saturate the community with. It's about things like diversity of housing stock, sustainability. It's about density of development. It's town character. It's and so it's those themes that we want to saturate. The themes with some examples or an explanation that we can to kind of saturate the positives versus the negatives of like, wait, you're taking this away from me, but versus here's what we're trying to build for the future.
I would suggest getting that out ASAP, like whatever we go forward with in March, whether it's just a small change to the common driveway or we find we have the authority to go for the whole enchilada. Okay. We should have that messaging already out there. So
yeah, talking about messaging, I mean, that group, the Anchor, approached us at the beginning of December. It's now 2 months and change since then. We haven't done anything to even respond to them, let alone speak to them. And I think I thought we had agreed that the kind of messaging program we want to develop is one that continues. It's not a one-shot deal. It's a continuous drumbeat of why are we doing this? Why the town needs it, why you won't get hurt as an individual property owner, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well,
Because the message will not sink in on a one-off.
no, but
Okay.
we need to start with the one over those two things we
Oh,
put
yeah,
together.
well, you need to start. There's no question.
Is the two things that we put together, we were discussing at our last meeting, should get out to 143 and to the Anchor and to the Mariner as soon as we can get them out. And then, we should approach all of them, all three of them, about having somebody from the group speak to them, put it on 143 TV, have somebody from the Anchor interview us, have somebody from the Mariner interview us if they want. They want to do it collectively, fine, or one of us. I'm going to nominate Katie as being the great spokesman for our group. You'll do a better job than I will.
I don't know.
But I agree, but we should do this because it was just interesting how that meeting ended up being a repeat of town meeting with the same speakers, the same cast of players, the same sentiments, the same obfuscation, and we're going to keep confronting it again and again. Regardless, even if fine, we have all the legal authority in the world and can go forward on March 30th with the whole proposed change, it's not going to change and it's going to break down. And yes, I was part of that, hitting on Clark about conflicts of interest, and I probably should have eventually kept my mouth shut about it and just gone on. But we're still going to be in the same position. And again, I'll give my colleagues some of the things they said the other night the benefit of the doubt, but I don't see a unanimous vote from my board, no matter what we do. So let's just get our ducks in a row, send the messaging out we have to do, and go forward.
I have a suggestion. So I will resend out. There were two pieces that we have. I think there are three pieces that we can quickly finalize and begin to use as communications. One is what Cassie had done. Let's see if I can.
One thing that I was wondering, can we add to this list maybe? And Tom, it's a good question to kind of start thinking about, is kind of creating the list of advocates on our side. And I think that it's part of this, but like, who are the people that are basically the Bjorklunds and whomever, but on our side? Like, who are those people that are gonna, like, who's gonna speak up for us?
I think documenting advocates is documenting and recruiting advocates is an important piece, Cassie. I think you're going to want to be, when you go through the recruiting process, you're going to have something to put in their hands while you're saying, would you speak on behalf? And
we don't have that yet. Okay.
I was kind of thinking, like, let's finish the talk pieces, and then you can go out and begin to recruit. And so I really like the idea. I think there's the really high level, which is what you were trying to get out here. And I don't think these words were final by any ways. In fact, you asked us for feedback, this is
Woody's, right? This is
yours. This is your document, Cassie, the background document. I'm just going to the last page where you had tried to summarize it down. This is where you had gone through.
Sorry, I think this is Woody's, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not Cassie's.
Oh, this
is Woody's professional white paper that we can use as funds to do our marketing campaign. We can sell it.
Okay, because I'm sorry, I apologize, because so let me step farther back. It's good. We all need to be on the same page.
Woody's is kind of like the technical component.
I know, and that's so this was the piece that Woody wrote right here. Mm-hmm. Actually, shoot, I've got too many documents up. I don't know what I'm sharing anymore. All right.
I'm sorry.
This is why zoning matters. Can you guys see this? Do you see something? So this is what Woody wrote, and I tweaked slightly. So there was the why zoning matters, and it was a 2-page paper that sort of lays out, like, and I think one of the impactful things was what are the pros and what are the cons of zoning. So there was that piece. Then Tom and I worked on a second piece, which was this. Damn. Which was, now that you know why zoning is important, why do you want to update the zoning bylaws? And this was making the case for why are we doing the bigger picture? And again, it went through kind of it's a 2 pages. It went through some background, and then it sort of broke down into what are we doing? What's the rationale for housekeeping and reorganization? And what are some examples of substantive changes that we'd like to make or would suggest making to the community? And so those were sort of the 2 white paper pieces that are, I mean, they need fine tuning, and everybody needs to proof and sign off on them, but they're close. I think your point, Cassie, was that there is a segment of the population, probably 50% of the population, that won't take the time to read something that is that dense in terms of text. And so could we boil it down to something even more high level, which is, I thought, what you were recommending
Yes.
last time, which was like some really high level takeaways, which were, why do I care about zoning, and boiling it down to even the some kind of catchphrases. And that's what I was
It's
suggesting.
kind of translating, those pros and cons into words that resonate with the average.
I think the format of the device has to be frequently asked questions, or Q&As, because everybody's got questions. I certainly, when I talk to people, they have questions and there are answers. They don't need to read 4 pages or 6 pages of material.
Yeah.
Because my questions may be different from Cassie's, that are different from Tom's, if were we all 3 citizens. Not on this work group, but just,
Yep.
it's inevitable.
Yeah.
And that's the way I would phrase going out to the public, and why I think we need to do this in bits and bytes and not in one great term paper.
No, I absolutely agree. I guess I'm trying to get everybody to agree on what we've got. Two pieces that are at like 85 to 95% done, which are a 2-pager on why zoning matters and a 2-pager on why update the zoning bylaws. My suggestion is that we finish those, and then we move on to putting together an FAQ and a very high level why, which is like literally big, bold kind of statements around why zoning is important. And you were starting to get some of those words down here, but I think that high level why is also going to be important. But we need to finalize these documents. We've got 2 in process, and we've got 2 that are sort of thought bubbles right now. And so what's the working group's pleasure? Do we want to finish the 2 that we have at 85%? Or do we want to move on to the FAQs and the high level why marketing?
I would vote for the latter, because to modify the first 2 might depend on answers we don't have, or answers that are fuzzy, things of that sort. We may need to beef up some sections and downplay others. I don't know. I don't view this as a term paper. I really don't. And I think it's got to be a communication device.
It also might be helpful if we're going to stick with the 85% on each document, just making sure our team is in agreement on all the points within. So instead of like perfecting the documents, it's more looking at the information. So for instance, like one of my things was like, is special town meeting the best public forum? And you guys all said yes. So I think it's almost kind of getting our talking points and agreeing. If we're not going to perfect where these documents lie at 85%, maybe it's more or less just making sure that the team is in agreement on what these documents have to date in them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think 85% is fine with me.
Okay, so let me circulate. So I think there are 3 documents that we need to all agree that are 85%, and we're just going to leave them there. It's, Cassie, your background document, it's the why zoning matters paper, and it's the why update zoning bylaws. And I will send out to this group those, and if people can, I'm happy to be Cassie, why don't you own feedback on your document and I'll own feedback on the other two, but I'll circulate it to the group and ask people to comment by next week.
Yeah, because I think if these three pieces are going to be our foundation, then there shouldn't be really much. We're just going to kind of group this into like nice FAQs and nice marketing pieces from here. So I think if the team collectively is like in agreement with all the information in here, then we can just use it to make it pretty and useful, right?
I agree. Okay, so let's make sure that everybody agrees with the 85% content on those three documents, and we'll set a deadline of, I'll send out those three documents and set a deadline of getting feedback to Cassie on one of them and the other two to me, and we'll finalize those. And I think we can use them, as you said, as the core from which we pull when we're putting together other stuff. Okay, that sounds like a plan to me. All right.
Tom, was there anything that you kind of as a lesson learned from that last meeting that you had that were kind of eye-opening, where Bjorklund or whatever, the voice of opposition, that could be useful for us to use as we block and tackle moving forward? Or was it just all the same old and let's disregard it?
You know, after the meeting, he texted me and he had a plan to try to sit down. I mean, I've known him for a long time, so his input could be valuable, but a lot of it was the same old. People don't disclose their interests. They don't disclose their conflicts. They misrepresent. You don't want to get into calling people names and pointing it out, but there comes a point where you're going to have to. But I mean, no, nothing changed. And the idea that eventually the planning board will be 5-0 on all the changes of the zoning bylaw, I just don't believe in that anymore. 4-1 maybe. But.
I mean, that was kind of my takeaway, honestly, was that there's going to come a point where you've done as much work as you can and you've done as much community engagement, and you're just going to have to call for a vote and live with a split vote. I mean, there is no unanimous, and I know that Paul Grady was very interested in just like cutting to the chase. Let's just vote and move on. I don't think we're at that point of like vote and move on, because the community and the questions weren't addressed maybe as fully as you like. But at some point, I think you're just going to have to live with a 3-2 vote and go from there. And it was tough.
It's interesting that Paul said to me that, he would have just gone forward, and if we were found that we didn't have the authority, so be it, we just pull it back. And and I didn't think that was a good position for the board. And Eric mentioned at the beginning of his comments how he was concerned about how the board is perceived and the integrity of the board, and so that the same thing, don't go down a road passing crap that isn't enforceable and is not legal. And I don't disagree with that. However, part of his comments was the perception. There is the perception, or at least some people are trying to create the perception, that this whole zoning rewrite effort is anti-development. I mean, Eric was making the comments that, he didn't want to see the board perceived as anti-development. And I don't know that I said it back to him.
It completely disregards the whole point of the master plan and the master plan implementation committee. That's exact opposite of what we're trying to achieve.
And I mean, I hope I answered. I don't recall if I answered that. I don't want the board to be perceived as pro-development either. And clearly, I think there's a division on our board amongst pro or anti or somewhere in between on the board right now. But it's important that the institutions of our committee, the planning board, zoning board, and the bylaw be respected, and we shouldn't go half-cocked. So that's why I didn't think taking a vote the other night was a wise thing to do. But I don't. Things are going to change. People are going to fall on one side or the other, and they're going to look at their own self-interest, or that they are just naturally pro-development. Some people will be reflexively anti-development. I mean, we hear it from the citizens' comments in town, on particular projects. Oh, this is a travesty. This shouldn't happen. All the open spaces being paved over, yada, yada, so we have extremes on both sides and somehow have to work into the middle. But
I think, first of all, we have to acknowledge to ourselves that our permitting boards are set up, 95% of the cases or more, to be majority vote. If unanimity is never written into a rule, regulation, or statute. It presumes fundamentally that the majority rules, but not absolute consensus. And so be it. I'm also thinking back, and Tom and Peter certainly have the history. To go back, I think we're on the third or fourth master plan, the first three of which never got implemented. We're on the fourth iteration of a new town hall because the first three got rejected after a year or two of study. That's just the nature of the beast, and we have to accept the fact that there will be disagreement.
that's true.
But disagreement, obviously, if we're in the minority, that's it behooves us to be out in front of that one. But doesn't bother me that we don't have a 5-0 vote on the planning board. Doesn't, there are people who are going to want to, frankly, tank the master plan, even though the town voted on it.
Yeah.
Because when they realize how the master plan may be implemented or brought to life, it may not suit their purposes. But so be it. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
I think we have to proceed ahead under the belief that we're doing the right thing for the townspeople.
Right. I think the example of the town hall is fantastic, because I'm sure the people on that committee feel more than frustrated. Didn't they?
They're bitter. They're bitter.
Didn't they all quit and it got replaced by the committee?
They're still bitter. And I can go back to 2 iterations back to 2004 or 5, and they still talk about it.
Yeah, you're right.
Um,
Yeah. Just have to communication is important, and I think you can do both. I think, whether we just post it on a website or publish it once, a detailed explanation is needed, because I'm not one that enjoys living in a world of sound bites, but that is what we now live in. People confront FAQs in all aspects of their life. So we need to do an FAQ piece too, but they're not mutually exclusive. So
right. FAQs answers have to be grounded in good law or other principles. But
so my point is just, we need to get on offense, and we need to do it
soon, because I think we're frittering important time away.
Yeah.
All we've done is spend 2 or 3 months and not communicated to the public since town meeting.
Yeah.
Well, we have to do that. We also have to get a spokesperson out of advisory and out of the select board to stand up and say why the town needs to do this.
And that goes back to Cassie's point. Who do we have on our side now?
Well,
we have passive or an active voice?
No, we need to get an advocate to speak up from both of those boards.
Absolutely. And maybe need to be part of any interviews that we're doing, so it isn't seen just as a little elite group. But
exactly, it has to be supported by the town institutions.
Yep.
Period.
And this isn't apropos of our present discussion, but it does. Let me just put it out there, because I'll forget the notion. Tom, I'm not sure how much authority the planning board has been granted by the town to set rules and regulations, but I can understand the need for clarity there, because what you wouldn't want in a town is to have a planning board setting rules and regulations that basically usurp the power of the Concom or the sewer commission or the zoning board or anything else. There has to be, I view this and most of these changes as residing within the planning board, but I would like to see that beefed up if it's needed. And Carolyn could tell us. I'm not the lawyer here, but I can see the need for that. So you don't have dueling boards, each having regulations that don't agree with one another.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, the alternative is everything gets put in a bylaw, and we all know what the problem with that is, so.
I think it's a solvable issue.
Yeah. Yeah, all right, well, I'll make sure, I'm going to need to leave in a few minutes, but I'll make sure that I get an email to Carol, and I meant to do it right after the planning board meeting, but didn't. I'll get that out to her. I'll copy everybody, I'll blind copy everybody on it. But it's pretty straightforward. We either have the authority or we don't.
And if you don't, how do we give you the authority?
Yeah, we don't. It has to be done as part of the
Yeah, it's part of our work process.
as part of the bylaw, and you know, in particular, the administrative article, which is now Article 12, would be the perfect place to explain it, because that's where you would explain the authority. Well, today you explain the authority of the building inspector and the zoning board. The funny thing is that the bylaw doesn't say much about the authority of the planning board at all. And the planning board's, you know, organizational article is often the general bylaws somewhere amongst all the other town boards. I think that's a change that we need to make, to bring the planning board into the zoning. And in that, we can spell out what it is, what it does, and what authorities it has. Anyway,
All right.
but
So,
that would need a bylaw change to do it, so.
yeah. So again, I apologize because I think we've just, Tom, we lose you in 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna try to keep you on in the car while I drive to where I need to go, so, but you're gonna lose me at least by
But we
12.
should, Katie, you're saying we should move on.
I am, and I guess, you know, I want to devote time to this conversation, so I don't want to do it when Tom is present and can be taking notes. And so I did, so the assignment that we gave ourselves, and we had a couple assignments, we had the communications, we had the RFQ, and then we had the beginning of reviewing Tom's work. And we agreed as a group that we're going to do two things. One, look at his proposed reorganization in terms of a framework. And then the second was to begin going through definitions. You know, I reviewed both. And I have some comments on the reorg framework, but to be honest, they're small. I went through the definitions, Tom, and I guess my concern was that what you shared was fantastic in that it was comprehensive. You went through and you listed out all of the definitions that are embedded in our main Article 2, which is where definitions should live. And then you went through and you pulled out of all of the other ancillary articles, additional definitions. And that was Article, let's see, I mean, they're all over. It started in Article 10, 14, 19,
Yeah.
20, 21, 22. And then you began, and then we had what we proposed. And then you started to list out a new organizational structure for them in your new proposed Article 5. But where I got lost, to be honest, was I couldn't tell from the document when I got to this section, starting on page 22 or 23, what was new versus what was existing, and if we dropped anything. And that's where I began to get a little bit nervous, to be honest. Like I almost needed to see a listing of all the existing definitions.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And the source, and then if there's a new proposed one,
yep,
what the new proposed one was. Because I went looking, as an example, I went looking for the definition of building or building comma accessory, and I couldn't find it in your new proposed structure under activity. You have the three sections: activity, commercial, dimensional, miscellaneous, and residential. I couldn't find it. So I began to get nervous, like, are we dropping anything? So
yeah,
I almost,
you're right. And I got to tell you, the cutting and pasting is a nightmare.
yep.
And it's sometimes when I've got so many documents on my computer and versions of this, that, and when I take something that's been cut, you know, that has deletions and additions in red, and I transfer it to a new document, well, then it doesn't show the red anymore, and it doesn't show what's crossed through and what's new, and so
Yep.
it becomes a friggin' nightmare for me. I think what I can do is take the existing definitions, and I suppose I can redline those as to what's out and in. And then I can I guess I can just put them in this, the current Article 2 is in straight alphabetical order without broken down into subcategories, which again, my idea, we don't have to do that.
I actually like that idea.
All right, well, that's fine. But what I think maybe for help in examining what's in, what's out, what's new, what's not new, I just take the existing Article 2 and the existing, then all the other articles definitions, and I just redline those.
Yeah, I wouldn't try to resort them at this point. The time will come.
Yeah,
But
all
if
right.
you had a good definition, then you can say, how would I sort this step? Where would I park this definition?
I can leave the sorting aside. All right, I can do that this weekend.
Bless you. Jeez.
Here's what,
You're just a side of insane, but I'm glad you're doing it.
The other thing is that I'm going to be at my girlfriend's trade shows in Las Vegas. I don't need to be standing around watching wholesale women's clothing exercises and an excuse
There's
to.
plenty of other things to do in Vegas besides
I
going.
understand that.
Now I'm
Tom would
worried.
volunteer
Now
to
I'm
do zoning
worried.
work in Vegas.
we can make a list for you, Tom.
I envision Tom by the pool.
Well, it's 60 degrees out there, but
Laptop.
I could certainly sit at the bar and gamble a little and type bylaws while I'm sitting there
Oh,
and not
boy. Well,
not being a trade
good
show.
for you.
Anyway, no, I'll get it done. I'll get it done, and that'll be easier if you see it in the current structure and you just see the straight redlining. That'll be easier for everybody.
So here's what I was thinking, Tom, was like, and you guys can see this, right? I'm juggling. So I was thinking that like we have the current definitions, and this is all of them alphabetical from Article 2 plus all the other ones you dug out, and just alphabetize it and get it in one big ass list, master list of our definitions existing.
Yeah, I'll do
I
that.
would then do a column that says the source, and it's as easy as this came out of Article 2, this came out of Article 10, this came out of, so we just don't lose where the original was. It's more of a documentation stuff. And then if there's new language or changed language, or in some cases, even a new definition you're suggesting, like I think there's a whole set of new definitions you have under commercial.
Yeah, well,
It's like, it's about the adult uses. It's under commercial definitions. I would put as an example, the adult uses over here.
yeah, and the reason for that you see a lot in the commercial thing is that it goes along with the changes I've written up for the use table. Our current use table has a zillion uses, some of which are archaic. It's a giant laundry list, and I'm proposing a massive simplification of it. And with that just comes redefining terms. So I can point all that out to everybody.
Then I was thinking that, so then we'd have a column, we'd have the existing definitions, we'd have a column which clearly showed what was the new changed, and it doesn't have to be redlined, but at least you could like literally compare current and proposed like in the same document. I did like your categories, but I thought it would be helpful to just have like a column that said, okay, this proposed definition for adult uses would fall under commercial as one of your categories. I think you had activity, commercial, dimensional, miscellaneous, and residential as your kind of 5 proposed. And then I left another column for columnists, but like for me to really go through this detailed, I almost needed to see it.
I think it'll be easier if you see in the current structure and what's.
Woody, I know you spend a lot of time on definitions. Would something like this be helpful to you?
It would be. I think there's a time and a place for what I'm about to say, and it's not right now. And that is that there is certainly when you come to non-conforming structures and uses, commercial and residential are overlap. The same enabling statute or whatever applies to both commercial and residential structures, let's say. And we can separate that out. I just don't know what it would look, whether we're adding clutter or clarifying. But
And that's
there's
why
a time and a place for that. Not
That's
now.
kind of why I'm suggesting let's keep everything alphabetical for now, and
Yeah.
maybe the categories will kind of begin to pop, because I actually, and you had started to do some of this around housing, like this idea of like everything just being alphabetical sometimes is really tough when you're trying to do it from a user perspective, but it has to be intuitive. So I was suggesting that we capture proposed categories, but maybe as we look at it, it will emerge.
Well, yeah, if you look at just something as simple as how would I simplify housing? Well, there was one category called transient housing, everything from B&B to lodging houses, et cetera, et cetera. They're treated the same in almost every case in the bylaw. And if they aren't, it's probably more of a happenstance because they were addressed in different decades. But it's possible to simplify, consolidate in some areas, and then we're going to need to have a finer cut in others, or some differentiation. But I look at these tables and look at the basic tables of uses. There is not a single use in that entire table, number 4, that differs from RA, RB, and RC. They're all the same. So just have one category, residential. Make it simple, and so on and so forth. But we can come at that. I think you're right. We have to look at this as it breaks down and say, wait a minute, there is a way to simplify this or delete that.
Yeah. So Tom, if you're willing to do this, I mean, it's a lot of cut and paste and organizing of what you have already done. I think that will really allow me to dig into the next level.
Yep.
And I'm happy to sort of.
I'll take a shot. I'm breaking up with being in the car now, so I'm going to have to drop off. But I get the gist of what everybody's looking for, and I'll get it to you as soon as I can.
Okay. How about this?
If anybody heard me.
Yeah, no, I can hear you.
We heard you.
I don't know, Katie, whether it's worth people taking as much time as, for instance, I did on Tom's document, which took a while, but it's sort of a deep dive. In most cases, I was fine. In some cases, I had objections. But when you come to objections, we'll just have to kind of devote some time for a group discussion.
Yep.
Does it or doesn't it make sense to have boats longer than 11 feet in your backyard? I don't know, 10 feet.
Yep.
I don't have a ready answer for that. Well, I do, but it's not.
So I guess my question, since Tom is already on the road, I would suggest that we let Tom do the work on definitions that I'm suggesting in terms of like just organizing it in a way so that we can dig in, and we have a meeting that's solely dedicated to going through definitions. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll send my little chart to Tom, and he and I can touch base on it if he has any questions. But again, I think it's just organizing what he's already done in just a slightly different spin, so that's super clear around what's existing, where the existing is sourced from, and what's new. And then beginning to think about, is there a categorization that pops out of the definitions that begins to make sense? And then we can begin to layer, then we can go through them literally one by one and make improvements. And maybe one of the things we talked about, but is people can begin to say, okay, are there diagrams or illustrations that need to be added to supplement? I don't think that'll be a lot of them, but again, it's something maybe that we can begin to capture in something like the comments column, like insert height diagram or insert diagram of lot width measurement. I don't know. Tom, how about you and I correspond offline in terms of when you think you'll have that definitions kind of re-swizzled, and we can schedule a meeting based on that. In the meantime, everybody has a homework assignment to get back to Cassie and myself around the communication pieces to finalize those to an 85% level next week. And then we'll update everybody based on conversations with Michelle as to the exact date that the RFQ is pushed out to, based on conversations with Michelle and what Cassie and Paul circle up with in terms of what follow-up they think they can push out. Incremental contacts. So I think I would say let's hold off on scheduling the next meeting until we know when Tom's going to have that work done, so that we can get it out to everybody and give people a little time to review.
Fine.
Okay.
Katie.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Sorry, it's Lauren. I just wanted to chime in. Sorry, I had to get in the car and actually head home, so I was intermittent for a bit, but I was listening in. I just want to just also highlight the importance that you guys have already noted about the communication piece. I think that's really important. And I think what we're seeing with the planning board right now with the public hearing process about common drive regulations is sort of a great case study for the larger zoning the zoning rewrite process. I think this is highlighting a lot for us. So I tried to input that earlier, but I wasn't able to do it on my phone. And then I actually sent you and Cassie, I plugged in some dates before I left the office to try to look at a 2 or 3 week extension. So if you two have maybe just a few minutes to walk through that once you close this meeting out, because I'd like to get to Michelle as soon as possible with just some thoughts.
Yeah, I have time right now. Actually, it's ideal for me to kind of go from one meeting to the other. I don't know, Cassie, if you've got other things.
I just have a 1 o'clock.
Okay, well, maybe we try and cram it in between 12:30 and 1. Lauren, do you mind circulating your Zoom link? We'll just hop from this to that.
I can actually just stop the recording here. We could just stay here.
Okay, that's great. All right, so next steps, communication comments by next week. I'll send that out today so everybody's clear what they're commenting on. Revised RFQ, we're going to work on today. And then Tom, I will send you this this grid in terms of how we can organize the definitions, and based on when you think you can reorganize the definitions into a slightly different format, we'll schedule the next zoning bylaw working group meeting. And then Peter, not to call you out, but I didn't know if you wanted to share any news with the working group at this point. It's pretty public.
Yeah, sure. I am going to be stepping down from the Open Space and Rec Committee at the end of March, which will take me off of this committee as well. Matter of fact, next Tuesday, we're having election of officers for Open Space and Rec. I'll be stepping down as chairman, and I will, do my best to get someone to step up and replace me on this committee.
Is your term up, Peter, or are you?
No, I've got some issues going on that I can't concentrate on this anymore.
Okay, well,
Sorry to hear that.
you'll be missed.
We may rope you in as an advocate. You'll be our first advocate.
Oh.
So, like
Citizen advocate. Oh, I can see this now.
Okay, so we'll let you step off if you agree to be an advocate for us.
Okay, I agree.
Okay.
Fair enough.
You got
Not that
off.
you had a
And I regret it. It's something that I just can't. I don't
Okay,
have
I'm sure.
time.
Yeah, no,
Time is all of a sudden a huge issue for me. So
yeah. Family first, and honestly, it's been great to have you on this committee. And
thank you. I enjoyed it, and I hope I made some contributions. And I was mostly quiet, but
no, you've made some great contributions. And Peter, you and I can stay in touch. And if it'd be helpful for me to go to that Open Space and Rec meeting to kind of pitch our lovely working group, I'm happy to do it. Remind me.
yeah, let me see what the
Okay.
sentiment. Frankly, there's mostly reticence about getting deeper involvement on the committee. So
Okay.
I'll do my best. I'll pitch hard and see
Okay.
if I can get somebody to step up. Because I've shot one member right now, and of course, when I leave, it'd be two members. And three of the members are liaisons from other committees that really don't want to get overly involved in anything else.
Yep.
And the remaining the remaining four people have already have liaison assignments, so it's got to be a little uphill.
Okay.
But I will do my best because I think this is very important. This is extremely important work, and you know, people on my committee should want to be part of this. But I'll do my best.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And I just wanted to give you a chance to let the group know.
Thank
before
you.
it
Yeah.
became much more public.
Yeah, I regret having to step off, but I have to.
Yeah, no, I got it. Okay. All right. So I am going to adjourn the zoning bylaw working group at 12:29. Thank you, everyone.